I still remember the exact sound that woke me up that night. It wasn't loud, not a crash or anything dramatic, just the soft click of my bedroom door, like someone trying very hard not to be heard. At first, I thought I was dreaming, that half-awake state where your brain mixes reality with whatever nightmare it's still clinging to. But then I felt it, that shift in the air, like someone else was in the room. I didn't open my eyes right away. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe something deeper that already knew who it was before I was ready to face it. My stepfather. Even thinking that word now still makes my stomach tighten. Stepfather. It always sounded temporary, like something you say until it becomes normal. But it never did. Not for me. He had been in my life since I was 15. My mom met him barely a year after my dad left. It all moved fast, too fast. One minute, it was just the two of us trying to figure things out, and the next, there was this man sitting at our dinner table like he'd always belonged there. He was charming in that polished, confident way, the kind of man who knew exactly how to say the right things, especially to my mom. To me, he was something else. Not openly bad, not someone you could easily point at and say, there's the problem. It was subtler than that. The way his eyes lingered a second too long, the occasional comment that felt off but could be brushed off as harmless if you didn't want to make a scene. The way he'd stand just a little too close in the kitchen, like personal space didn't apply to him. I learned to ignore it, or at least pretend to. By the time this happened, I was 22. I had just moved back home after finishing college because my job situation hadn't worked out the way I'd planned. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few months until I got back on my feet. That house never felt like home again after that night. Lying there in my bed, I kept my breathing slow, steady. Pretending to be asleep felt safer than confronting whatever was happening. I could hear him now, moving carefully across the room. The faint creak of the floorboard near my dresser gave him away. He knew that floor creaked. Everyone did, which meant he was trying to avoid it and failed. Why was he in my room? That question repeated in my head like a drumbeat, getting louder with every second. Maybe he needed something. Maybe he thought this was the guest room. Maybe... No. That last thought didn't even convince me as I tried to cling to it. I felt it before I saw it. The presence right next to my bed, close enough that I could sense his body heat, the faint smell of his cologne, something woody and heavy that always made me feel slightly nauseous. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. And then, nothing. He just stood there. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. My mind was racing, trying to decide what to do. Open my eyes, say something, pretend to wake up naturally. Before I could make a choice, I felt the mattress dip slightly. He sat down. That's when the fear really hit. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that locks your body in place. My hands were clenched under the blanket, nails digging into my palms. What was he doing? I forced myself to stay still, to keep my breathing even though every part of me was screaming to react. His hand brushed against the blanket near my leg. Light, almost hesitant. I flinched internally but didn't move. Another pause. Then he spoke. "Hey," he whispered, like he was testing whether I was awake. I didn't respond. There was a tension in that silence that I can't fully explain. It wasn't just awkward. It was loaded, like something was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Emily," he said again, a little louder this time. I let out a small, groggy sound, pretending to wake up. Slowly, I opened my eyes, blinking like I was disoriented. "What?" I mumbled, pushing myself up slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around me. He smiled. That same practiced, easy smile he used on everyone. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "Then why are you here?" I didn't say it out loud. I just stared at him, trying to read his face in the dim light coming from the hallway. "It's late," I said, my voice still thick with fake sleep. "Yeah, I know," he replied, rubbing the back of his neck like he was nervous. I just couldn't sleep. That explanation hung there, completely insufficient. "So you came into my room?" I asked, sharper now. He chuckled softly, like I was overreacting. "I just wanted to check on you." Check on me. At 22, in the middle of the night. Something inside me snapped a little, but I kept it contained. "I'm fine." He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning my face in a way that made me want to shrink back. "You've been stressed lately," he said. "Figured maybe you needed someone to talk to." At 2 in the morning, in my bedroom, while I'm asleep. None of it added up, and we both knew it. I'm good, I said again, more firmly this time. Another silence, longer this time. He didn't move right away, just sat there, looking at me like he was deciding something. Then his hand moved again, resting on top of the blanket, closer to my knee now. Emily, he said quietly, his tone different now, softer, heavier. I immediately shifted back, creating space between us. I said, I'm fine, I repeated, and this time there was no pretending in my voice. That seemed to break whatever moment he thought he was having. He stood up quickly, clearing his throat. Right, yeah, of course. I didn't mean to, bother you. Bother me. That word felt so small compared to what had just happened. He walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Don't mention this to your mom, he said casually without turning around. She worries too much. And then he left. The door clicked shut again, just as softly as it had opened. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second over and over again, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it felt like. But it was. There was no misunderstanding that kind of moment, no innocent explanation for the way he looked at me, for the way he sat on my bed, for the way his hand moved. And the worst part, a small, sickening voice in my head kept asking how long this had been building, how many times I'd ignored the signs because it was easier than confronting them. The next morning, everything felt normal, too normal. My mom was in the kitchen making coffee, humming to herself like it was just another day. He was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, completely relaxed. Morning, Emma, he said when he saw me, like nothing had happened. I froze for a second before forcing myself to move. Morning. My mom smiled at me. You look tired, didn't sleep well. I hesitated, glancing at him. He didn't look up. Yeah, I said finally. Just couldn't fall asleep. Too much on your mind, she said sympathetically. You need to relax more. Relax. I almost laughed. I poured myself some coffee, my hands steady even though my chest felt tight. I kept my distance from him, staying on the other side of the counter. But I could feel his eyes on me again. Subtle, careful, like he was making sure no one else noticed. I didn't say anything. Not then, because part of me was still trying to process what had happened.
And part of me was afraid of what would happen if I did. I spent the entire day pretending I was fine. That was the first thing I learned after that night. How easy it is to act normal when everything inside you feels off. I went through the motions like nothing had changed. I answered emails, applied to jobs, even sat through a phone interview that I barely remember. But the whole time, there was this constant awareness sitting in the back of my mind, like a weight I couldn't shake. He was in the house, and I knew something now that I couldn't unknow. I kept replaying the way he said my name, the way his voice dropped when he thought I was asleep, the way his hand moved across the blanket like he was testing boundaries. That wasn't accidental. That wasn't harmless. That was deliberate. And once you see something like that clearly, you can't go back to pretending it's nothing. Still, I didn't say anything to my mom. That might sound insane, but if you've ever been in a situation like that, you'd understand how complicated it feels. It's not just about telling the truth. It's about what that truth does, what it breaks, what it changes. My mom loved him, not in a casual way, not in a this might not last way. She had rebuilt her entire life around him. After my dad left, she was shattered. I remember those nights when she'd cry in her room thinking I couldn't hear her. I remember how long it took for her to start smiling again, and he was the one who brought that back. So what happens when you take that away? What happens when you tell her the man she trusts, the man she shares a bed with, walked into her daughter's room in the middle of the night and sat on her bed like that? Would she believe me? That question alone was enough to keep me quiet, because the truth is, I didn't know, and not knowing felt worse than anything. That evening, I tried to stay out of the house as long as possible. I drove around for no real reason, stopping at random places just to kill time. I sat in a parking lot for almost an hour, staring at my phone, not even scrolling, just sitting there, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Eventually, I had to go back. The house looked the same as always. Lights on in the living room, the faint sound of the TV drifting through the walls. It should have felt familiar. It didn't. The moment I walked in, I felt it again. That tension. He was on the couch, watching something I didn't recognize. My mom was in the kitchen. "Hey," she called out when she heard the door. "You're home late." "Yeah," I said, slipping off my shoes. "Just needed to get out for a bit." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Dinner's in the fridge if you're hungry." "I'm good," I replied quickly. I didn't want to sit at that table, not with him there. I started toward the stairs, but his voice stopped me. "Emily." Just hearing him say my name made my stomach tighten. I turned slowly. "Yeah?" He muted the TV and looked at me, his expression calm. Too calm. "Can we talk for a second?" Every instinct in my body screamed no. "I'm kind of tired," I said, already taking a step backward. "It'll just be a minute." There was something in his tone, not forceful exactly, but firm enough that it didn't feel like a request. I hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen where my mom was still moving around, completely unaware. "Fine," I said quietly. I walked into the living room but stayed standing, keeping a clear distance between us. He studied me for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. "About last night," he started. My heart skipped. "I shouldn't have come into your room like that." That was it? That was how he was going to frame it? "I couldn't sleep," he continued, leaning forward slightly. "And I don't know. I made a bad call." A bad call. The understatement made something inside me snap. "You think that's what it was?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He held up his hand slightly, like he was trying to calm the situation. "I'm just saying it didn't mean anything." Didn't mean anything. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You sat on my bed." "I know." "In the middle of the night." "I know." "And you don't think that means anything?" His jaw tightened a little, like he didn't appreciate being pushed. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, his voice still low but firmer now. "I said I was sorry. That doesn't make it okay." Another pause, this one heavier. Then he leaned back, his expression shifting into something more serious. "Look," he said, "we don't need to turn this into a whole thing. A whole thing." That phrase hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. "I'm not the one who made it a thing," I replied. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I care about you," he said. The words made my skin crawl. "I've been in your life for a long time. I've watched you grow up. Of course I care about you." There was something about the way he said it that didn't feel right. Like the words themselves were normal, but the tone underneath wasn't. "Then act like it," I shot back. His eyes flickered, just for a second. "I am." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're not." The tension between us thickened, filling the room in a way that felt suffocating. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He smiled. Not the friendly, easy smile from before. Something different. Smaller. Tighter. "You don't have to be so defensive," he said quietly. "I'm not being defensive. I'm being clear." "About what?" "About boundaries." That word hung in the air between us. He leaned forward again, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on mine. "And what boundaries are those?" he asked. The question felt loaded. I swallowed, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "The ones you crossed last night." Another silence. Then he shook his head slightly, like he was disappointed. "You're reading into this too much," he said. "I didn't do anything to you." That was the moment I realized what he was doing. He was rewriting it, minimizing it, framing it in a way that made it sound harmless, like I was the one overreacting. And that scared me more than anything else. Because if he could do that so easily, how far would he go? "I know what happened," I said quietly. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something colder. "Then keep it to yourself," he replied. The words landed like a slap. For a second, I just stared at him, not fully processing what he just said. "What?" "You heard me." My chest tightened. "You're telling me to keep this to myself?" "I'm telling you there's no reason to upset your mother over something that didn't happen the way you think it did." The audacity of that almost took my breath away. "You're unbelievable." "Am I?" he asked calmly. I felt my hands starting to shake, so I clenched them at my sides. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen," I said. "I'm not asking you to pretend," he replied. "I'm asking you to be smart." "Smart?" "Yes. Think about what you're saying before you say it. Think about what it does to this family." There it was. Not denial, not apology. Control. "You don't get to turn this around on me," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I'm not turning anything around," he said evenly. "I'm just being realistic." I took a step back, needing space. "This conversation is over."
"Emily." "No," I cut him off. "I'm done." I turned and walked out before he could say anything else, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I went straight to my room and locked the door. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat on my bed with my back against the wall, staring at the door like it might open again at any moment. Because now I knew something for sure. This wasn't over. And whatever this was, it was only just starting. I didn't tell my mom the next day either. I wish I could say it was because I was carefully planning what to say, or waiting for the right moment, or trying to gather evidence, but the truth is a lot simpler and a lot uglier than that. I was scared, not just of him, but of what would happen if I said it out loud. Because once you say something like that, there's no taking it back. It doesn't just hang in the air, it settles into everything. Every room, every conversation, every memory. It changes how people look at each other. And deep down, I still didn't know if she would believe me. That uncertainty kept me quiet longer than I want to admit. But I did start changing things. Small things at first. I kept my door locked all the time, even during the day. I started taking my phone with me everywhere, even to the bathroom. I avoided being alone in the same room with him whenever I could. If he walked into the kitchen, I found a reason to leave. If my mom stepped out, I made sure I was either gone too or locked behind my door. It turned the house into something else entirely. Not a home, not even a temporary place to stay. It felt like a space I had to navigate carefully, like every movement had to be calculated, like I was always one wrong step away from something happening again. And the worst part? He acted completely normal, like that conversation never happened, like that night never happened. He'd sit at the dinner table, laugh at my mom's jokes, ask me casual questions about job interviews or friends like nothing had changed. "Any luck with that marketing position?" he asked one evening, passing me the salt like we were just a regular family. I barely looked at him, still waiting to hear back. "You'll get something," he said, nodding confidently. "You're smart. Employers see that." The words sounded supportive, encouraging, but coming from him, they felt hollow, fake, like everything else. I muttered a quiet thanks and kept my focus on my plate. My mom didn't notice anything, or if she did, she didn't say it out loud. She was happy, comfortable, secure in the life she had built with him, and I hated that I was the only one who knew what was underneath it. A few days passed like that, tense, controlled, silent. Then Friday night came. My mom had plans with a friend, some dinner and drinks downtown. She mentioned it earlier in the week, and at the time, I didn't think much of it, until I realized what that meant. I'd be alone in the house with him. The thought sat heavy in my chest all day. I considered making plans of my own just to avoid it, staying out late, crashing at a friend's place, anything. But something stopped me. Part of me didn't want to keep running. Part of me was angry, because why should I be the one adjusting my life around what he did? Why should I be the one avoiding my own home? So I stayed. That might have been a mistake. My mom left around 7, calling out a cheerful goodbye as she grabbed her purse. "Don't wait up," she said with a smile. "We might go somewhere after dinner." "Have fun," I replied, forcing a smile back. The front door closed, and just like that, it was quiet. Too quiet. I was in the living room, sitting on the couch with my laptop open, pretending to watch something while scrolling through job listings. I could hear him moving around upstairs for a while, then the sound of the shower turning on. I told myself I was fine, that nothing was going to happen, that after our conversation, he would keep his distance. I wanted to believe that. About 20 minutes later, he came downstairs. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Slow, unhurried. I kept my eyes on my screen, pretending not to notice. "Just us tonight," he said casually as he walked into the room. I didn't respond right away. "Looks like it," I said finally, my voice neutral. He lingered near the doorway for a second, then walked over and sat on the other end of the couch. Too close. I shifted slightly, creating space without making it obvious. "What are you watching?" he asked. "Nothing," I said, "just browsing." He leaned back, stretching his arm along the back of the couch, not touching me, but close enough that I was very aware of it. "You seem tense," he said after a moment. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." I closed my laptop, setting it aside. "What do you want?" He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Can't I just talk to you?" "Not really," I said flatly. That seemed to amuse him more than anything else. "You've got an attitude lately," he said. "I wonder why." There was a brief pause, and then he chuckled softly. "Still stuck on the other night?" My chest tightened. Don't. Don't what?" "Act like it was nothing." He turned his head, looking at me more directly now. "I told you it wasn't what you think. And I told you I'm not stupid." The air between us shifted again, that same tension from before creeping back in. He sat up a little straighter, his tone changing. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I let out a short laugh. "I'm making this harder?" "Yeah," he said calmly. "You are." I stared at him, disbelief mixing with anger. "You came into my room while I was sleeping. And I apologized. That doesn't erase it." "It should," he replied. The confidence in his voice made something inside me twist. "No," I said, "it doesn't." Another silence. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "You know," he said, "you're not a kid anymore." My stomach dropped. "Don't," I said again, more firmly this time. "You're an adult," he continued, like I hadn't spoken. "You can understand things on a different level now." "Stop talking." But he didn't. Sometimes lines aren't as clear as people like to pretend they are. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted from unsettling to something much darker. I stood up quickly, putting distance between us. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice shaking despite how hard I tried to keep it steady. He didn't move right away, just watched me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not doing anything to you," he said. "Yeah, you are." "No," he replied, shaking his head slightly. "You're just choosing to see it that way." The way he twisted everything made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality for a second. But I wasn't. I knew what I felt. I knew what happened. "I'm serious," I said. "Don't come near me again." Finally, he stood up. For a second, I thought he might actually respect that. But instead, he took a step toward me. Just one. It was enough. "Back up," I said immediately. He stopped, holding my gaze. That moment stretched, heavy and charged. Then slowly he raised his hands in a mafia gesture of surrender. "Relax," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you." I didn't believe that. Not anymore. Because whatever this was, it wasn't normal. It wasn't safe. And it definitely wasn't over. I grabbed my phone and my keys without breaking eye contact. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Out. It's late." I don't care. I moved toward the door, my heart racing, every instinct telling me to get out of that house as fast as possible. "Running away doesn't solve anything," he called after me. I didn't respond. I just opened the door and left. The cool night air hit me like a shock, but it felt better than being in there. Safer. I got in my car and locked the doors immediately, my hands trembling as I started the engine. And as I drove away, one thought kept repeating in my head. I couldn't stay there anymore, because if I did, something worse was going to happen. I didn't go back that night. I drove for almost an hour without a destination, just putting distance between myself and that house, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My thoughts were loud, chaotic, overlapping, fear, anger, disbelief, all crashing into each other. Every time I stopped at a red light, I felt exposed, like he might somehow appear out of nowhere, knock on my window, drag me back into that conversation I couldn't escape. Eventually, I ended up outside my friend Lauren's apartment. I hadn't called. I hadn't texted. I just showed up. It was close to 10 when I knocked, and for a second, I almost turned around, almost convinced myself to go back home, pretend none of this was happening, crawl into bed, lock the door, and survive like that for a few more days. But then the door opened. Lauren took one look at me, and her expression changed instantly. "Whoa, hey, what's wrong?" I didn't even realize I was crying until she said it. "Can I come in?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. "Yeah, of course," she said immediately, stepping aside. The moment I walked into her apartment, something in me cracked. The tension I'd been holding in for days finally broke, and I started crying harder than I expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, uncontrollable tears that I couldn't stop. She didn't ask questions right away, just closed the door and pulled me into a hug, letting me fall apart for a minute. Hey, you're okay," she said softly. "Just breathe." I shook my head against her shoulder. "I'm not." She pulled back, guiding me to the couch. "Talk to me." I sat there, wiping my face, trying to piece together how to even start. It's my stepdad," I said finally. Her brows furrowed. "What about him?" And then I told her. Everything. The night he came into my room, the way he sat on my bed, the conversation the next day, the way he twisted it, minimized it, tried to make me feel like I was overreacting. And tonight, what he said, how he looked at me, how close he got. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking again. Lauren didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finally stopped talking, there was a heavy silence. Then she said, very clearly, "You can't go back there." I let out a shaky breath. "I know." "No, I mean it," she continued. "This isn't just weird or uncomfortable. This is not okay, at all." "I know," I repeated, my voice breaking slightly. "Does your mom know?" I shook my head. "Why not?" That question hit harder than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "I keep thinking about it, and then I just freeze. I don't know what she'll do. I don't know if she'll believe me." Lauren leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "Emily, listen to me. Even if she doesn't believe you right away, that doesn't mean you stay quiet about something like this." I looked down at my hands. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy," she added, softer now, "but you can't protect her at the cost of your own safety." That word again, safety. It felt strange hearing it out loud, like it made everything more real. I don't want to blow everything up," I said quietly. Lauren sighed. "It's already blown up. You're just the only one who knows it." That sat with me, heavy, unavoidable. She was right. I had been acting like staying quiet would somehow keep things stable, but the truth was, nothing about this was stable anymore.
I don't think I can go back there tonight, I said. You're not, she replied immediately. You're staying here. I looked up at her. Are you sure? Obviously, she said, giving me a look. You don't even have to ask. I let out a small, relieved breath. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said. Just promise me you're going to figure out your next move. Because this, she gestured vaguely, this situation, it's not something you ignore and hope it goes away. I know, I said again. And this time, I meant it. That night, I slept on her couch. It wasn't comfortable, and I barely slept anyway, but it was the first time in days that I didn't feel like I had to listen for footsteps outside my door. The first time I felt even a little bit safe. But morning came fast, and with it, reality. My phone had 3 missed calls from my mom and 2 texts. Where are you? Did you stay out all night? Call me. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. I'm safe. I stayed at Lauren's. I'll come by later. I didn't explain anything. Not yet. Lauren was making coffee in the kitchen when I walked in, my phone still in my hand. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, though it wasn't entirely true. You going back today? I nodded slowly. I have to. My stuff's there. She hesitated. Do you want me to come with you? Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to not face that house alone, but another part of me knew I couldn't keep avoiding this. No, I said finally. I'll be okay. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. Call me if anything feels off, seriously. I will. I left her place around 10. The drive back felt shorter than the night before, but heavier, like I was heading straight into something I couldn't avoid anymore. When I pulled into the driveway, his car was there. Of course it was. I sat in my car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel again, trying to steady myself. Then I got out. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. My mom was in the living room, pacing slightly, her phone in her hand. Emily, she said the second she saw me. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. I told you, I stayed at Lauren's. Without telling me? She asked, her voice a mix of concern and frustration. I'm sorry, I said. I just needed some space. She studied my face for a moment, like she could tell something was off. Is everything okay? That question, simple, direct, impossible. I hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything from the past few days came rushing back. The night in my room, the conversation in the living room, the way he told me to keep it to himself, the way he stepped toward me. I couldn't carry it anymore. No, I said quietly. Her expression shifted immediately. What do you mean? I swallowed, my heart pounding. There's something I need to tell you. She frowned slightly, confused. Okay, what is it? I glanced toward the hallway. He wasn't there, but I knew he could be, at any moment. I don't want to say it with him in the house, I said. Her confusion deepened. Why? What's going on? I forced myself to hold her gaze. It's about him. The words landed between us, heavy and undeniable. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. No more silence, no more pretending.